Just a quick word of warning before we get going that the following podcast will almost certainly contain spoilers and may also contain strong language and conversations of an adult nature.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Strong Language and Violent Scenes, the podcast giving a second chance to films that might not deserve them. I'm Mitch Bain, I'm a horror writer and occasional doer of musical things.
And I'm Andy Stewart, I'm a filmmaker and stuff.
It's very impassioned as usual.
Yep.
And delighted to be joined on the Skype again, another guest this week. You know her best from her work as a producer, most recently on the opening film of Frightfest 2018, Jenn Wexler's The Ranger. Heather Buckley, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey guys.
Hi Heather, and congratulations on the Frightfest announcement from last week.
Thank you. I feel so honored, and so does my team and my director Jenn Wexler. We're just beyond. Also, that it's the opening night film, and then the closing night film is Noé's climax.
It's crazy.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Which I cannot even. As a journalist back in the day, I think he was my most covered director when I would write for Dread Central and Fangoria. So I believe I've interviewed him 3 times and covered most of his filmography.
Wow.
He's an interesting character.
I would agree with that assessment. He is.
Right, we'll dig into The Ranger in a little bit, but first things first, you've brought to the table tonight William Peter Blatty's 1980 film, The Ninth Configuration. So do you want to take us a minute just to outline why you chose it tonight?
When I was a young girl, I think a lot of people, maybe in the States, don't know about you guys, would look at different tomes to figure out what movies to watch. And I think the most frequently cited is the Psychotronic Film Guide for me. I use Phantom the Movie Guide to research heavily what I would go into the video store and get. And because of its cast alone, as a 14-year-old girl, I wanted to watch Ninth Configuration. So I watched it on VHS, and because of my interest in philosophy, being someone who talks a lot and a host of character actors in the film, I just love Ninth Configuration. A lot of folks have heard about it. Most folks have never watched it. I think people have heard about it now, maybe post Shutter Island coming out. But I think we need to talk about Ninth Configuration. I'm actually working on developing a new film. And when I read the script, I said, you guys have to watch Ninth Configuration because it's an incredible example of Socratic debate in film, or rhetorical debate. Also, William Peter Blatty's writing is hysterical. It is in Legion, which became Exorcist 3, and Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, of which I've also read. There's a great rhythm in there. But this is all historically back to my love. It's like, what kind of girl loves the Dirty Dozen and Kelly's Heroes? It's like me. I like an ensemble cast of old man character actors saying crazy dialogue for about 2 hours. There's nothing I would rather watch more. I think the great grandson of that sort of style is what Tarantino did. Like, a lot of these movies you could just listen to as a radio play, and you've absorbed a lot of why I love those films. Just listening to these characters, listening to what they have to say. It's great.
Some of the dialogue in it is amazing. And full disclosure, the first few times I tried to watch The Ninth Configuration, I was just a daft arsehole, really. And I think the first 2 or 3 times I tried to watch it, I turned it off before the halfway point, like before it got like super interesting. I couldn't get over the kind of farcical elements of it, so I kind of just turned it off.
How old of an Andy, or young of an Andy Stewart are we talking about here?
How old or young of an Andy Stewart? 15?
Okay, yeah, I can kind of understand that.
14, maybe?
That is interesting that we both found it at a young age, because I was thinking, like, what kids are watching Ninth Configuration, which would come to be one of their favorite Stacy Keach films. Who's thinking about Stacy Keach at the age of 14? I mean, those are the right people is what I'm saying, but I haven't met any in my life.
Full disclosure also, I saw this for the first time last night.
It's a good time to start.
Yeah. It's probably not as good as age 15, but 31 is, yeah, that's where I found it. This film wasn't short of fans, and like critically, people like Leonard Matlin and that were pretty into it. But it was underseen at the time, which I think kind of makes it worth defending. A lot of people missed out on it and have heard about it but haven't seen it.
Exactly. So you need to give them an excuse, like developing a script or doing a podcast, to have them see Ninth Configuration.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't think it just comes up in normal conversation. I've become like, I show people or new people in my life a lot of films, and I do show them Ninth Configuration, and I'm always extra still and quiet because it's like, are they going to understand it? Are they going to like it? And there's other films like that I show people. For example, when we talk about this movie, I show them Naked, I show them The Ruling Class, I show them Rot Sod. So there's this themic quality of characters that are super, super articulate for the entire time period. And again, it's interesting you brought up the farce element. It is in there. And I don't think we really see farces anymore in cinema as we did in like post-70s cinema.
Yeah.
I can think of like maybe there's some of that element in the Coen brothers, but it is certainly a tone of its time.
I think coming from the UK, whether we like it or not, we're so kind of exposed to weird things like the Carry On films and stuff from a really early age that you either enjoy a farce or you kind of flinch away from a farce. I've always been more of a flinch away from a farce type of guy.
Oh, I'm more of a lean into a farce kind of guy, I think.
Oh, there you go.
And I definitely did for because I think that the more farcical elements of this are they're played out more heavily in the first kind of hour or so.
Oh, yeah.
And not knowing what was coming next kind of thing. I think that it's a film you can split kind of pretty distinctly into two halves, and I loved both halves equally, but I wasn't prepared for where it went at all. See, Heather, just before we get into this properly, there's something that we do. This could be a really good one for this. There's one thing we get guests to do every week. So, Andy, can we have 30 seconds on the clock?
Yeah.
So, for the benefit of anyone who is crazy enough to listen to this episode without having seen the Ninth Configuration,
this might actually be the episode where it is perhaps most crucial that you see the film.
I think so. I think that's fair. Can you go for a 30-second synopsis?
During the Vietnam War, a lot of soldiers go crazy and they have them held up in a castle. In that castle, a new psychiatrist comes, and there's a bunch of lunatics that are there. And dealing with the lunatics, dealing with the new psychologist, and the old guard that is at the castle where everyone is that's standing is at an asylum, everyone needs to figure out the difference between loyalty, love, God, atheism through conversations and the people who orbit the castle.
Oh, spot on.
Right on the buzzer.
Right on the nose.
Nicely done.
Ideal.
Nicely done. That's one of the better ones we've had, I think.
Last week's was a shambles.
It was a disaster.
But that's also the brilliant part. If it's also shambles, that's also brilliant. It's very nice.
When this kicks off and we get into the opening credits, the first of what feels like a lot of crazy decisions in it. Denny Brooks' San Antone.
Yeah.
Plays over the opening credits almost in its entirety.
Well, I think there's about tons of different versions of the film.
Oh, it's the version I saw.
I don't think...
There are different... There actually... Because I worked on the Second Sight disc with David Gregory. So if you watch the Second Sight disc, I produced it. During the producing of the extras, I did find out like there are different cuts of it all over the world, but they would need to be scanned in. And there's the cut that I grew up with, the VHS cut that I like better. The ending where what he does doesn't look deliberate. It's as if he died in battle. And I've had this discussion online with one of my favorite writers and artists, Steve Bissett. And I know that he also prefers that ending, which is more ambiguous. And both of those endings I'd love to talk about. But again, I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, they've not seen the movie. So maybe we have like a little snippet in the end when we kind of like flash, like don't go further if you don't want to hear about the end of the film. But the end of those two endings are very curious. So I have it on VHS because as a child, I would pirate all these movies. Like you would find Evil Dead 2, Letterboxd unrated, and then I would put my VCRs next to each other. And that's how I had my copy of Ninth Configuration for years until it came out on DVD. But the DVD has the ending I don't prefer, but Blatty talks about why he chose that ending in the commentary. So I don't know what ending you guys have watched. And because I don't have a all regions Blu-ray player, though I work on so many, I don't know what the ending is on the 9th. I also don't know how the extras turned out. I hope they look beautiful.
They're lovely, quite lovely. We'll take a moment towards the end of this to just stop and discuss the ending that I think certainly I watched in preparation for this, and I think probably the same one that you watched, Mitch.
Yeah,
if you watched it on Amazon.
Yeah, I did. So when we kind of open on the mental hospital, as it were, which mental hospitals I think have now featured in more than half of the films on this podcast, as have kind of draconian mental hospital staff,
but not to the same level of
certainly not
of madness that is in here. It's remarkable.
But so the first patient and our protagonist, I think personally, is that we meet is Scott Wilson's Billy Cutshaw. Scott Wilson is unbelievable in this film.
Yeah, it's a ridiculously strong performance from Scott Wilson. There's so much going on in his eyes, it staggers me.
I don't know if I maybe saw this because when I was, again, a huge movie buff since I was very young, I think I may have seen In Cold Blood first before I saw Ninth Configuration. Okay. So I was familiar with him as an actor. And of course, I'm very happy that he's gone on to great fame with Walking Dead. He was such an iconic actor to me growing up. The performance in the film, though obsessed with Joe Spinell and though obsessed with Jason Miller, we can get to Jason Miller as well, is Ed Flanders' performance of that dialogue. Because we have to tell the listeners that the dialogue in the film, they are long, complicated monologue speeches about, as I mentioned, like God, atheism, the goodness of man, that all these actors, they really have to bring it. They have to be present to the material, and they have to sell this very stylized dialogue and keep it grounded.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably philosophical film at times, I think. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I think that, so much of it is almost in monologue form that everyone has to be on it. And everyone is.
It's nailed across the board.
The monologue, the section that I think about the most when I think as like a horror fan and thinking about horror and thinking about someone who walks out in the world wearing a whole bunch of punk gear is Jason Miller's almost monologue about Hamlet. Yeah. The idea that do you play crazy so you aren't crazy? To sort of let it out of your system. And I always think about the genre in that way. It's like, do we create crazy, grizzled maniac stuff for our own sanity? Do we play the villain for our own needs, which I believe like punk rock and sort of counterculture is about. Yeah. So that is, I think, out of everything in the film, what stays with me the most is his conversation about Hamlet's madness, which is not really foreshadowing because it happens kind of in the middle of the film. But that piece is what that film is about. Are you insane? Are you acting crazy in a crazy time? Because this is also, you could look at it as a vetsploitation film, which those type of films I'm very obsessed with. Like, I mean, some of them are very sincere, but Vietnam films like Jackknife and Deer Hunter and Combat Shock and post-veteran films like Taxi Driver, Rolling Thunder. The Venn diagram of where this film fits in my life, it overlaps a lot of things. And also for people just wanting to pick up Ninth Configuration, it's like a lot of the cast was in Exorcist 3.
Yeah.
Also true. Yeah. See, the scene you're talking about the Hamlet's Madness monologue.
Yeah.
See, I think that it's a really good, it's one of my favorite examples of how well this film juggles tone. That, stop me if I'm wrong here, but it gets to the end of that. And it's at that point that Reno, because obviously this is a discussion about Hamlet in the context of him producing Shakespearean plays exclusively starring dogs. So when he gets to the end of that, he kind of turns around and shouts at a dog, being like, you see, we're doing the scene my way. And I think that like the way that it kind of pivots out of something so kind of profound into something that really made me laugh so much, I think is a good example of one of the things that I think this film does really well.
Well, Blatty was a comedy writer. He did Shot in the Dark and a lot of films like that. And yet he's known, I guess, within our genre world as someone who made one of the who wrote what would then go on to be one of the greatest horror films of all time. But there is also an interest about the farce element, the comedy, and the laughing, screaming, and ability to deal with tone. Because Legion is very close to Exorcist 3, except for the ending. Mm-hmm. But there is that kind of very funny dialogue in it. What was I listening? I was listening to Paul Schrader's podcast. And he was talking about how he would, when he comes up with the idea for a movie, he says it out loud. And because he believes that film is part of the oral tradition rather than the written tradition. And I would argue when I read Blatty's work, it seems like it always had that cinematic quality because it makes more sense if you're saying it out loud because of the rhythm, because how it's fun to say it.
I definitely see that.
Yeah,
I think it's like in a lot of this for sure.
Yeah.
So Stacey Keach in this.
Oh, Stacey Keach in this is superb. I mean, he's essentially drafted in, or we're led to believe he's essentially drafted in as a psychiatrist who's maybe there to assess whether or not these inmates are in fact insane or whether they're just trying to get out of battle, essentially. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. That's an oversimplification. But he is astonishing.
And I think he's got a difficult job to do in there as well, because I think that he has to play it pretty straight in a cast full of really big personalities.
And at risk of being dwarfed at times, he still manages to maintain a real steadiness that's impressive. He never gets lost in all the madness going on around him. There's this point where he's sat in the office and Scott Wilson's leaping around, throwing stuff around, and he still manages to exude an air of
pretty unwavering.
Yeah, exactly. A good word, unwavering. In the face of all that.
Yeah, I was watching Fat City yesterday, which he's in, and I was just trying to meditate on Keach as an actor because he's everything that you've mentioned. It's like he is sometimes the leading man, though he has a very unique face. He has a broad face. He's very tall, and then he has this grounding quality to him. But there's I think part of that grounding quality is that within his eyes or within his presence, there's a real empathy there and a real grounding that it's like you don't feel sorry for him. It's just you can't help but to connect when you see him on screen. And there's a casual style about it because it's not desperate. It's almost a radiant quality. And I think that's maybe one reason, because he's this sort of grounding, empathetic that's so big, that empathy is so big, is that you can have all the wild character actors around him. His
eyes come into play. Again, I'm talking a lot about people's eyes tonight. I've obviously been trying to work on my eye contact or something. But early on, before we know the kind of truth about him, there's a moment where he kind of snaps and his eyes change so dramatically. They change in size, they change in intensity. They look like the blood vessels are burst in them. It's a really amazing performance.
Yes, he's sort of like a steady sleepwalker throughout the entire film, but again, very open and vulnerable. And then we see him. Yes, that scene is incredible when he yells at Major Groper for his lack of kindness, for his lack of being like almost like Christ in a way. And then there's, I guess, one scene of actual brutality, but I believe it's more physical. And then there's a great scene of agony during the flashback as sort of where he goes emotionally.
Yeah, I think that because he's so unwavering the whole way through, as the tone of the film changes around him. I think that's really interesting because I think it works equally well in both halves. Like, a lot of my favorite stuff in this is just kind of Colonel Kane, Scott Wilson and Stacey Keach, just kind of their one-on-ones are a lot of the things that I really enjoy. But in the first half, you've got, you know, when he's reading his file aloud and he's talking about the episode he had before he was going to go to space, where he had the outburst where he said that going to the moon was impolite, uncouth, and at any rate bad for his skin. And that kind of thing, which I think that's all in the delivery, and that's really funny. But then later on, he's playing it the same way for obviously kind of conversations that are a lot more profound, have a lot more depth. And I think because there's so much kind of like, there's so many big, like I said, there's so many big personas and so many big performances in the film, it's kind of easy to overlook how much of a backbone he is to the whole thing.
I would agree that his unwavering ability is a through line throughout this film. It makes him feel like, because it's an ensemble film, but it also makes him feel like the lead at the same time, even though the narrative is his story and about his story. Without Keach, Nicole Williamson, I believe, was going to play Keach's role, and then he got kicked out of the country.
Was it Michael Moriarty?
I know Nicole Williamson was supposed to work on Ninth Configuration. Talking to some of the actors at some of the cons about this, like Atkins and things like that, it's like all these guys were like rowdy New York City actors that they locked up like in this Eastern European castle for a very long time, and it drove them insane. And some of them would start fights, and all of them would go to the bars. And there is this story that I was trying to remember of Nicole Williamson was a part of this cast, but he was kicked out of the country for just being Nicole Williamson.
I imagine it wasn't your traditional film set and your traditional shoot. I imagine it wasn't what a lot of these guys had done before. It feels very much like they would have been questioning what the fuck they were doing there at points. I feel that it was maybe a little bit unprofessional at times from Blatty himself.
Yes. I see what you mean is Michael Moriarty was going to play Cutshaw, which is very interesting, and it was Nicole Williamson who was going to play Kane, which would because then you would see Nicole Williamson in the cutscene from Exorcist 3, because I think you can't, like all us as genre fans, you cannot talk about Ninth Configuration without Exorcist 3.
They're closer in tone and in mood than they certainly are to The Exorcist.
Well, the idea that you would remove Nicole Williamson from Ninth Configuration, but when you have to like do reshoots of Exorcist 3, you add him. Years later, that's fascinating. He was fated to be directed by William Peter Blatty.
Yeah,
or because it was reshoots, not William Peter Blatty.
It's pretty early, it's relatively early on in the film that you see a conversation between Reno and Cutshaw, where Reno kind of posits the idea that Kane might be insane himself, which honestly, up to that point and shortly after, was not something I'd entertained at all. I think a lot of where this goes I didn't see at all.
That's great to me that we're sitting here, obviously myself and Heather have seen it, and for you to now just be discovering it and to not have, up until less than 24 hours ago, you had no idea where this film was going. I really enjoy that.
I'm glad, because I'm glad that there's an upside to me being so poorly educated.
I think it's fun because, again, like I brought this film up a lot, and people who have seen this film and they love this film, it's almost like telling people that your favorite band is the Pixies, if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
It really is. It's like it's a super B-side. It's out there in the world. Well, as I mentioned before, when Shutter Island came out, because it's very similar, and what it's trying to go for is the most time in pop culture I've ever heard mention of Ninth Configuration.
I don't know where to jump ahead to.
Well, I think the lunatics running the asylum is kind of a trope. And during that time period, because I mentioned my love of the ruling class, there was that strain in cinema that had a lot of psychiatry in it, or psychiatry as a sort of narrative pivot in film that you may not see a lot anymore. Maybe the last big one I can think of is like Silence of the Lambs, or it didn't seem like psychiatry as a way to explore the human condition,
right?
Other than just someone who is a psychologist. But I think that was big in the day.
It's something that runs through all of Blatty's stuff. Even take away, just if you focus on his writing, it's something that's through his whole writing. It's something he was clearly pretty impassioned about.
Yeah, and I think when the film reaches that point, I think that kind of is roughly kind of line in the sand for where the tone of the film starts to shift.
So,
did you feel that you learned anything from your viewing of it for the first time about the human race? Are you interested in incredibly and philosophical films like this? I mean, I assume you've watched like I mentioned, like Mike Leigh's Naked and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation that I enjoyed the most, I think, was possibly the exchange between Cutshaw and Kane about human sacrifice as the best demonstration of kind of human good. And I think that was probably that was something that I hadn't considered, and I would say that was the thing that I was still thinking about when I went to bed after I'd stopped watching the film. I would say that was of the kind of philosophical strands in there, I think that was the one that I took the most away from, personally.
It's pretty powerfully illustrated in that scene, I think, and I think it's such a strong kind of through line throughout the rest of the film. I'm glad that's probably my favourite moment in the film as well, that initial discussion about the nature of sacrifice and I guess about faith. Love it. It's my favourite bit in the film. And I used to always turn it off before that point.
Why did you struggle with it so much while watching it?
Because it was so bonkers, I think, when I was of an age where, I mean, things like the Exorcist, it was like a luxury item in the UK because it was banned for so long. So when I saw the Exorcist, I think I wound up seeing it when I was about 11 or something at a party that one of my mates' big brothers had thrown. And then I was obsessed with the Exorcist. So I kind of hunted down a lot of Friedkin stuff. Like I remember being obsessed with The Guardian. And then that was a bit of a derisory snort.
Just no one's ever brought up their love on the Guardian in front of me before. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate hearing favorites for the first time. I interviewed a director once, and he was telling me the movie that got him into making a horror filmmaker was Critters 2. And I stopped the conversation a bit. It's like, I'm not questioning your love of Critters 2 or that it's wrong, but I need to know why. I as an artist.
In defense of myself, having since revisited The Guardian, it's not the best. But at the time, when I don't know, man, what year did that come out? What would that have been about? Would have been about 12 or 13 or something, maybe, when that came out. Maybe. I think
that's an important horror age, because when I watched Ninth Configuration, if I was around 14, that means like I was listening to the Ramones and the Sex Pistols when I was 13. There's something about that age that you start finding your identity, your music, or the confidence to do that. Just sort of watching films. Again, I think it's my deep interest in philosophy and listening to people debate very complex points that I found incredibly interesting when I first watched it. Also, my background, like I was raised Polish Catholic, so a lot of that narrative and the stories of which it always reminds me in Clockwork Orange when he thinks about the Bible and he thinks about like the orgies and the whipping and stuff like that. So you're lucky. So if you're raised Catholic, they talk about a lot of devils and sacrifice and this sort of like hardcore martyrdom, which I think is fascinating as anyone who's into horror. Like you get your own like Stephen King stories at a young age with that. Yeah. So I also found it inspirational because before I became a producer and writer, I was a fine artist, and a lot of my art still today looks like plague diseased martyr saints, and that to me is about sacrifice, and it's about the painfulness of a consciousness, which I think Ninth Configuration is also trying to talk about, because the reason to turn to insanity, even though it is a sort of a therapeutic insanity, is to sort of erase the consciousness and trauma of what's going on. I mean, when I think about the movie The Exorcist, the saddest part of that movie is that Karras has no faith, which for like a priest is pretty much like a bullet to him that he has to struggle with. And the only thing that can cure him of this lack of faith is seeing an actual supernatural force, which, by the way, when I was talking to Blatty, is that is why he has faith, which is so interesting. So he has faith because he's able to see and perceive something else, like what we can. I would document the supernatural. I am not religious for the same reason because I have no perception or no feeling of sort of an other than us, other than our flesh and our skin, in a very Cronenbergian way, how I view existence. I am still fascinated, though, in these debates around that, in the uncanny of seeing what would be considered to be the devil, the angel, a miracle. Because if you turn the coin and you sort of move from Blatty to Flannery O'Connor, a lot of his stuff is like, if Jesus and God are real and real in this world, it's incredibly frightening because they're very strange and large forces that you don't want around. So it's a lot of that in the work that I do and the writing that I'm interested in. The movies sort of is like why Ninth Configuration is also important. And when I first proposed that, I was thinking that you can't talk about Ninth Configuration without talking about all the actors involved in their genre work and all the genre that kind of filters through Ninth Configuration, because Ninth Configuration is not necessarily a horror film. I would guess it's a comedy drama, and it has like all your favorite exploitation filmmaker in it. William Peter Blatty brought you The Exorcist, and then all these actors that we are undeserving of because they're just great. No one deserves Neville Brand. He's too amazing.
Which was why I think I didn't relate to it when I was younger. I saw William Peter Blatty's name on it. I knew that he obviously had written The Exorcist. I went into it believing what the box was telling me and got what at first appeared to very much be a slapstick farce with a guy with an S drawn on a t-shirt that thinks he's Superman, and I just couldn't. And I think it took me maturing as a person and reading more and watching more stuff to realise, hang on a minute, there's actually a lot of super fucking cool things in this. And actually the transformation of, as Stacey Keach changes from being Hudson Kane into Victor Kane, actually the people in the asylum go the other way. They kind of chill out the madder he gets, which is pretty fucking cool as well.
I was looking for my Phantom of the Movie guide so I can see how it was described to a 14-year-old Heather Buckley. But what did your VHS look like?
Oh God, I don't even remember. It wasn't a VHS I owned. I used to rent it, right? So, and when we rented things back in the day, you would pick up the box. I would just see William Peter Blatty on the box, pick it up, take it over, and then you get a bare plastic box with a tape inside it. So you get a transparent plastic box with a tape inside it, so you don't just fucking steal the whole thing.
Did you used to record tapes as a young lad?
I did, but I didn't start doing that. I would say... oh God, I'm about to reveal a criminal act. But I used to buy things, record them, and take them back, and say they weren't working.
I love that. Well, you're a hooligan. That's fine. I mean, I made my father drive me everywhere to find as I mentioned, letterbox versions of stuff. One reason I still have my VHS collection, when I think everyone sacrificed theirs, is because I had all these because of course you make like punk mixtapes for your friends, but I had like mixtapes on VHS of like Hellraiser 3, Entertainment Weekly was showing the red carpet with Doug Bradley and Pinhead makeup. Like, I have all that recorded. It's just, I have clipping books. It's so sad. This is like, why were you unloved and thought strange growing up? It's like, these are all the reasons. Your clipping books, your VHSs. So it's not too long, but it might be interesting. 'Cause I don't know. There could be some folks out there that have the Phantom of the Video Guide.
Cool, okay.
You can't, obviously that doesn't really work on an audio podcast, but Heather is holding up a copy.
I was just... it's true, but I wanted for all the kids playing at home for you guys, so you can see this is the original young Heather Buckley edition. I have no idea how I came across this book.
Heather, that must be a well-thumbed book by now.
It might have like little markings next to it. Another one that was very important to me was the Fangoria Video Guide Volume 2 with Jason on the cover, and I would like mark little things in there, and it's just well worn. It's in the library, which is awesome because this is Ninth Configuration. Okay, on this page alone are very important movies to me. I have Night of the Hunter, The Night Porter,
right,
which I just got on Blu-ray to upgrade. The awesomeness of Nighthawks because of Rutger Hauer's beauty, and then underneath is the Ninth Configuration. So 1979, it has 3 little diamonds out of 4. Or out of 5. Produced, directed, and scripted from his own novel by William Peter the Exorcist Blatty.
There you go.
This surreal exercise, originally titled Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, stars Stacy Keach's Kane, a shrink ostensibly sent to separate the men from the Meshuggahs at the remote Gothic castle in the Pacific Northwest that's been converted into a sort of military playpen for real and or imagined mental casualties. Only problem is Kane may be the looniest of the lot. The Ninth Configuration is a wildly uneven mix of free-form Freudian vaudeville at its best. Its non sequitur exchanges play like a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, script doctored by Bill Griffith's Zippy the Pinhead. Broad satire lifted intact from some bad college play, remedial theological probings, and at its core, an intriguing tug of war between Keach and an off-balance astronaut Cutshaw, imaginally interpreted by Wilson, with a tighter focus and shorter running time. The Ninth Configuration could have been a cult classic. There are so many who already deem it so, and it stands unsteadily. Blatty's one-man movie offers enough black humor, offbeat, dramagoguery, and celluloid surprises to make it well worth an attentive viewing. So for some reason, when I was a young girl, I really wanted to rent Ninth Configuration from the video store.
Well, that was a podcast, guys.
No, I think that's pretty close. There's some kind of cool jabs in there though as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's unfair in its jabs at times. Some of them are pretty fair, I think.
It might be misunderstood. So this was published in 1989, which is sort of like it's a cool time for genre, cool time for film, because like the mid 80s, you're moving out of the counterculture. It kind of died in the early 90s, and you could still only know about the cinema through buying a lot of books and going to the library and sitting in Barnes & Noble in the mall in Central Jersey and reading all the film books. That's the only way that you could find this stuff. But I don't agree, Mr. Video Watchdog, with those jabs, because I don't find the conversation to be remedial.
No, me neither.
That was something I wouldn't agree with. I actually think the conversation's quite impressive and spectacularly deep, but there were some bits that I did agree with.
To me, it's always, and it was like movies during that time, the freeze frame ending, I will never understand. I think that comes from TV.
That does feel like it's kind of like the migration from TV, doesn't it? Definitely.
Is now a good time to talk about Jason Miller and Joe Spinell?
I think it's always a good time to talk about Jason Miller and Joe Spinell because this is what will sell, because they're going to be horror fans listening to this and go, why is this applicable to me? And it's applicable to you because of all the people who would go on or were working in the genre that day. Because I assume part of our conversation will bring us to Richard Lynch. It's like someone
I've got that down.
Of character actors and went, what genre character actors do we need? So Jason Miller, obsessed with his performance in The Exorcist, and just sad that he didn't do so much acting in his life, because who has a face like that? Yeah. And you're used to him playing those kind of like more solid, mournful roles. Mm-hmm. But here he shows his comic timing. That he's very funny, and he's, again, as you mentioned, he's able to play with the tone of the material that he's getting. That it feels so sincere at some point, and then it turns around and it's actually a joke. Or is it a joke?
He's clearly having the best time in this. He's got one of the most expressive faces I've... The Exorcist, easily one of my top 3 favourite films of all time. Horror or not.
Were you raised Catholic?
No, I was raised nothing.
Same.
Interesting.
The way he emotes is unbelievable. I'm talking a lot about people's faces tonight. Normally I just talk shit and
well, that's when you're talking about like character actors, they have their face because it's kind of a shorthand to who they're playing, and that's why they're great helpers in films. I mean, I'm only when I work on movies, I have a list of old man character actors that I need to work with. There's a place where I could put them. That's very special. I was asking about sort of like raised as sort of deal because my writing partner and I. We're both raised like Eastern European Catholic. You might be religious, and I'm like a existentialist, like atheist on my end. And it's a lot of horror that comes from people with a Catholic background who are filmmakers, like the violence of Scorsese's films, The Exorcist, William Friedkin. It's like you trade. I don't know what that is. It probably is just random. But we've always noted that. It's like, God, that's a really fucked up film.
But when you say it like that, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think I was just more raised by David Cronenberg than anything else. I mean, that
he is the best.
Yeah, I want to pull something in just quickly. So I want to jump ahead to basically the central twist in the film. I think
you want to head this up? I mean, I will head the episode up with a spoiler warning.
Yeah, but I think it's probably time to dig into that.
We didn't touch on Joe Spinell.
Oh yeah, let's talk Joe.
One, everyone should know that Spinell's character in the movie is named Spinell.
Yep.
I think that's the number one most odd.
Now, I am of the understanding that he was friends with Blatty and he just said, I want to be in this, put me in it. I will just go by my own character's name. My character's not in the book. Just put me in it. I'll just make up my shit on the go.
And speaking of faces, his face. I have the Mondo Maniac poster in my bedroom. Which is like the 3/4 profile of Spinell in black and red, because a lady needs a Spinell in her bedroom. I am fascinated by his sort of, again, the effortless acting that is incredibly charismatic and fascinating to watch. Unbelievably photogenic, though not necessarily a handsome man. Beautiful eyes, beautiful big eyes and lashes, completely ravaged skin, and this strange line reading that he always give. It's part feminine. There's an elegance to it. There's also like this awesome Brooklyn accent to it. He's fascinating in everything he does. And he was a staple of the 70s, because how many movies was he in the 70s that went on to just be like A-list legendary film?
And when you actually think that he ad-libbed everything in this film,
I always say the line from like that Jason Miller says. He goes like, "Get the fuck out of here!" Like the way when he's trying to chase Spinell away.
They share a lot of screen time together. That you must have quite enjoyed that.
Yes, yes, I did, because they're fascinating.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I like to sit there and call up my friends and think about like what, because one reason that I love character actors is because they have this incredible, unique look to them that I find endlessly fascinating. Because when you think about movie star, you think of sort of like the Tom Cruise sort of look. But the actors that I am only interested in have this sort of very sort of like big eyes, rugged look, like Harry Dean Stanton. It's like it's just you could just stare at at them. You just have a movie. They didn't do anything. They smoke cigarettes for 90 minutes, and it's this hypnotic state that they put me in. And I was, as we were talking about Stacy Keach before, I was just sort of meditating on Keach as an actor, how Keach is able to appear on camera, how he's lit, how the lens looks at him. Because there's people that are just photogenic. And that doesn't mean that they're beautiful or not beautiful. They're just highly photogenic and interesting when you put them in a camera. A strange story. So the person who used to drive me to do all these VHSs all the time and like would take me to Fangoria horror conventions was my father. And my father loves movies. And just recently, like someone needed like an old man to tie up for their short film. And it's like, have Joe Buckley do it. He needs to like get away from my mother. and you see him in like a normal everyday world. He kind of looks like Paul L. Smith or Paul Sorvino, but he's lit under a camera. It's weird. It's like, why is my father so photogenic? So there's a something that these character actors have that it's almost mystical. At least I feel that way. I feel under the spell of Richard Lynch.
Well, Richard Lynch is another one. We did an episode of In the Mouth of Madness, and I talked about Jürgen Prochnow's face in a very similar way. I feel like Jürgen Prochnow's got a very similar kind of ravaged, haggard face.
Yeah, like weather beaten.
Yeah, but he's got such a fucking interesting face that I just can't help but look at. I want to look at him.
Yes, you don't have to do anything. It's very interesting. I'm glad that we all feel the same way, because as someone who makes films, it's just why do I light that face and get a long lens on that face, and it's the best face ever.
Yeah, I always feel like character actors are character actors for a reason. Whereas I have this ability to kind of effortlessly guide material.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much more on a character actor beyond just being pretty, or they carry so much more, I think, and so much of that is in their face. There's so many boring-faced fucking actors out there.
Is this just going to end with me once again loudly enthusing about how much I love David Strathairn? So.
yeah. Again, you're allowed to. You're fucking obsessed with David Strathairn.
This is what I was going to say, blessed in this world, is because a lot of American actors I feel are not as ravaged as then we get the UK actors who, Ian McShane's face.
Yeah, you get Peter Mullen.
Those faces are amazing, and you don't see them any place else. I mean, Ray Winstone could be more ravaged, but he's still great.
It could stand to be more ravaged.
Yeah, we'll pass that on.
But give them time. That's like a character actor can start. Like Harry Dean Stanley acted
till his last breath, pretty much.
Yeah, like past 70s. I don't know when he died, but he was always in his
ancient. 90s. He was in his 90s.
It's hard to know. Yeah, Lucky, which is amazing, is that you only get better with age, with a certain sort of role. And I think also the way the actors work is, of course, like they have to be aware of their presence to be able to project that. Because the guy who said that character acting is sort of like a shorthand is I was interviewing John Schuck, who I love, for the Demon Knight disc, and I flew down to where he was, and I had that conversation. We talked about Altman a lot. Because he's not in the film Ninth Configuration. He's not in the film Demon Knight a lot. But when John Schuck says yes to a Demon Knight interview, you go to him.
For sure.
And so he talked about his character in the film. It's like there's physicality, there's sort of presence, because you're not there a lot on screen time. So you create this shorthand so people get the character right away. So he felt that's sort of one of the traits of sort of hiring an actor like him or that type of actor is really bringing that to the role. Yeah. A lot of these guys have done extensive theater.
Yeah.
And when you've done extensive theater, then that you have a whole different kind of actor you're working with. And I was always interested in filmmaking in general, is that like for first time directors, it's like, God, if you can find an actor with a theater background, because theater, they just run themselves on stage.
I would sooner have someone who'd never been in a film but was a stage actor than someone who'd done loads of film and that was their expectation.
I want to pivot back to the film.
What, for fuck's sake? Right, just, okay, if you must.
Just to talk about where this goes and how it gets there.
Yep. It gets madder and madder. You've got Major Namak, goes from having a Superman S drawn on him to wearing a full Superman uniform. I also noticed he had a phone booth which he got changed in.
Oh, I didn't see
which
that,
I thought
yeah.
was quite lovely.
And casually during a pan do you see it. So not a lot of time is spent that
Absolutely.
he gets changed in a booth. It just happens to be there.
Yeah,
but that's the comedy of it.
Which is quite it's quite lovely.
That's it. But like, I think a lot of the funniest jokes and a lot of things that I've seen in film and TV, a lot of the jokes are things that you just spot like that. Like you say, when it's like it's a really smart thing, but no time is spent on it at all. It's incidental, and you either see it or you don't.
You've got him. You've got Nazi uniforms. You've got a whole section about casting the right dogs to be in Shakespearean plays. You
have the Dracula poster.
Yeah, you've got Frankenstein masks. And then you've got a guy on a fucking jetpack. So, it gets madder and madder and madder till it hits a kind of, I guess, an apex.
I'm going to say a madness apex, yeah.
And then you have your kind of tipping point of madness, which I guess is the revelation about Kane's real identity.
Yeah, which is at the point that we understand that we're introduced to the fact that what we've understood previously to be his brother, this kind of Killer Kane, this kind of mythical figure, he killed a bunch of people during the war, is actually Kane himself.
Yes.
And
then we find that out how Ed Flanders interacts with Stacy Keach's character, right? Is that Ed Flanders is always glib and always fun and always trying to make him laugh.
I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
Which makes the reveal even stronger. Because he was kind of always acting like his brother. Yeah. Or if we have siblings, how we sort of kid around with them. And then we learn when we have this, it's almost like the end of Psycho when we have to sit and explain what went on and the cops are there, the military police. He goes into his backstory and he says, I was always the one to make him laugh. I was always the funny one.
See, I thought this was amazing. Like, see, I think it's a great reveal anyway, but the way that it's done, for one thing, it pushes another great almost sideline performance into the forefront as well, because he's great all the way through this. Yeah, like I said, I think it's a great twist, but it's presented in a way that kind of pulls the tenderness out of his performance that hadn't really, because his performance had mostly been played for laughs up to that point.
Well, all the stuff with the trousers, where in fact Blatty himself, I think, steals trousers from him.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Like the way that ends up playing out, it explains away what you've seen in a way that you don't expect. And like I say, it kind of pulls this fragility and this kind of tenderness out of his performance that hadn't been there. And I think that it's definitely a much better way to reveal that than the way it's revealed in Shutter Island with the whiteboard in the lighthouse.
Oh, absolutely.
But no, I think
it's a much more human way.
It's incredibly well done.
Yeah.
I really like it's like I say, it's a great twist, but the way it's presented is just unbelievable, I think.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And a great insight that it pulls the tenderness of his performance, because he says, as he was trying to play with his brother and have his brother remember him the entire time. And it also pulls out the tenderness, but also the incredible sadness.
It's so tragic, yeah.
Because he does break down that he doesn't remember me. And he set this all up so he could try to help his brother.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it more personal than a story, which I believe there are other films that sort of use that the asylum trope to try to learn from the mental patients trope, but it's like this whole film is really about his brothers.
Yeah,
and that is also a reveal, because by revealing that one fact that he's actually Killer Kane, it's like we're watching a movie. We've been watching a movie about brothers this whole time.
Yeah,
and loss of that.
Yeah, no, 180'd my expectations and my understanding of it in a way that I was not ready for at all. So, see, I think it's shortly after this, though. It needs to be that we get to the the bar scene where so Cutshaw escapes and he goes to this bar where he's kind of set upon by this biker gang.
Well, Cutshaw's had the discussion with Kane by this point, and it's completely flipped his kind of perception of things. He has to get away for a while, I think, and he goes to this bar close by, and there's a biker gang in there. We get a brief glimpse of the biker gang earlier doing what appears to be a lynching on the back of a truck, but we get to see a lot more of them, and it is lovely to see Richard Lynch in there, although he's playing an absolute fucker.
I have a hard time finding anything lovely about this scene. This really, really unsettled me. The bar sequence as it plays out, I found extremely hard to watch. And I'm not sure entirely why that was.
Maybe we need to talk that out, because I always felt as like the Ninth Configuration could have been great as something that was a comedy, a drama, a philosophical piece, and then all of a sudden, even the filmmaking changes to do what is almost like a straight, humiliating exploitation scenes where you have your gels up, you have Richard Lynch and Steve Sandor and fucking eye makeup. Stylistically, it makes no sense to exist in this film, which is why it has to exist in this film.
Yes.
The build-up, actually, throughout the whole scene, the build of tension is unbelievable, because it starts, you know right away that this isn't going to end well. From the first minute, there's all those guys in there, and Cutshaw's had a fair bit to drink, and it's such a slow, steady build. It really ramps the tension up in a way that I'd totally forgotten about. It's probably been about, I'd say conservatively, about 6 years since I last watched this film. And I had totally forgotten about the level of tension that's in this scene. I was blown away.
And I think, Heather, you're hitting on something there when you say that. I think that it's not just that it's this extremely uncomfortable scene and this extremely well-made scene and extremely well-written and stuff. It's how jarring it is in the context
of what you've seen.
And I mean, at this point, we've seen a lot of stuff, and we've seen the film run the gauntlet of tones in a lot of different ways, and nothing prepared me for how uncomfortable this made me. And I think that, it's as much to do with that as it is about the scene itself.
Can you sort of pinpoint what made you uncomfortable about it? Was it the humiliation?
I think so.
Was it the cruelty?
Yeah, I think it probably is that. I think that I've always had this thing where I think that this kind of victimizing of a vulnerable person who's vulnerable for whatever reason is something that I think has always kind of put me on the back foot. And I think that in this context, where I think, because I really like the Cutshaw character.
Oh yeah,
I'm very invested in him at this point. Yeah, of course. And I think it's kind of a nod to how well put together this thing is and how good the performances are. But so I think that there's something about how, especially when he's like chained up and things, when
they're pushing him to the floor.
Yeah,
he can't really block himself, so he's really at their mercy.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think that it's just when you know that character and you understand it, and you're basically watching him interact with people who don't. It's the whole thing's put together in a way where I think that like everything that they do right from the beginning, when they're kind of knocking his drink around and stuff, I think that you feel every one of those kind of like little invasions of his personal space and stuff just as much as you do the kind of heavier, the more obvious violence. Yeah, you've got this feeling of dread. You know it's not going to end well, but I think that it probably goes back to the fact that, historically, I tend to struggle with scenes where characters who are either physically or mentally vulnerable get kind of jabbed at by people who either are willfully ignorant to or don't understand their situation.
Thematically, Stacey Keach's character Kane goes after Major Groper for being cruel, and he mentioned something about the caterpillars. Now, in the actual book itself, Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, is that there's an entire speech there about people who torture and kill caterpillars, and I think it's related to sort of a story of a boy that they knew that did that. So it could be the crescendo of that element. It's like if Grouper is cruel, so it first starts, it's like the Vietnam world, the world is cruel, Vietnam is cruel, and therefore you have this effect of these characters in the asylum. Grouper and the people who run it, as we've seen have run in these institutions, you've seen a lot of 70s films, they're cruel, but this time they have the avenging angel. They have Kane who's going to go in, and then our third level of cruelty are the bikers, because it's like it's Cutshaw's in danger. Kane is humiliated himself, and it's the idea of it's also I'm trying to figure out from a sort of like from a text standpoint, sort of a biblical standpoint. It's like he decides to not turn the other cheek, of course, and to strike out vengeance for his friend and save his friend, and to teach him.
Yeah, and he pushes so hard against his nature and who he now knows himself to be. I think that's really, really interesting, watching him. Oh yeah,
the build to when he actually snaps is so good.
Struggle with who he is and what he is at that point until
because we know he's a killer. We know he's a killer because that's been revealed,
and he knows he's a killer now. Yeah, watching him battle that while his friend's getting humiliated and ultimately, essentially, raped. It's pretty powerful stuff, and I can understand, Mitch, why you found it disarming.
I mean, by the time this was over, I felt like I've been, in the best possible way, I felt like I've been watching that scene for about 4 days.
And it is a long scene, actually. It is a long scene.
But yeah, no, it was heavy going. But I wanted to kind of give it some fair airtime because I think that it's pretty.
So it's
important.
2 levels of sacrifice. It's like if Kane has found peace in playing the role of someone who's not a murderer and playing the role of someone who is a helper and a healer, he has to actually sacrifice the nature that he's found that he could live with to be the monster again to save his friend.
Yes. So after we get clear of the scene, Kane and Cutshaw, they head back to the asylum.
I think it's worth mentioning what happens pretty quickly after that.
Oh yeah, on you go.
That Kane embraces who he is and
oh Jesus, yeah, of course,
destroys a whole biker gang himself with his bare hands.
Yeah, that's something we probably shouldn't leave out.
Yeah, he throws someone so hard against a bar that their hair falls off. Like, it might have been a wig, but I would like to believe that he threw them so hard that their hair flew off.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
He's a badass.
And the beginning, of course, is like grabbing that guy's hand when he comes up off the floor and crushing the glass in that guy's hand, and how he has such a high pitched scream.
It looks so good as well that when that happens, all you see is his hand reaching into the shot to do it.
That's right. Yeah,
yes.
It's so cool.
He's got a real creepy Elvis vibe to him. Steve Sandow's character. It is a real weird Elvis-y thing.
I would love to know why the eyeliner.
Yeah.
I love the eyeliner, but you want to know why the eyeliner.
Yeah, but why?
To me, it felt a bit Vernon Wellesley, a bit like Wes from Road Warrior.
And by the way, Richard, as you have Spinell as Spinell, Richard Lynch is Richard as well.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, right.
I don't know in contemporary cinema if I see a lot of that, where you just get an iconic like character actor. It's like we're just gonna call you by your name. It's fine. Maybe we need to bring that back.
Particularly like
makes things easier.
But yeah, whenever they get back to the hospital or the facility after that, and it's at this point I think that the film starts to pull in towards the end. And again, it pivots back and tonally it pivots very sharply because the barroom scene's like absolute chaos, and then you get back to this kind of like what is like one of the most kind of like thematically interesting, also one of the most tender scenes of the film. It's night and day from what had come before. It's
like they're at a church, and it has that sort of quiet, prayer-like feel.
Yeah, that reverential,
a kind of confessional feel.
Yeah.
Yes, and also there's sadness in this.
Oh, very much
there's
so.
the reveal of Kane's true nature. There's also an acceptance of Kane as true nature and the sinner by Cutshaw because he was able to save him. And I think even for all of us, all our misfits listening out there, is that the idea that someone would come to our wretched nature's rescue, I think means a lot to Cutshaw's character, and I think a lot to the audience that's watching it. It's like, which is the idea of sacrifice, that you've thrown it all away, even the own comfort of who you are, to come save me. Even though Cutshaw himself put himself out of desperation in the course of danger.
Yeah, he kind of was kind of in the fighting line.
He provoked it through his actions. Though even if it is provoked, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be rescued or saved anyway if someone has the ability to do that.
Yeah, the ability and the inclination to do that.
To Hulk out, perhaps.
But then what you really have, ultimately, is Kane's final rebellion against his true nature, and showing that by removing himself from the equation that there is true sacrifice and true goodness in man.
Well, because because after the act of violence, he goes back to a quiet place.
Yeah.
And of course, like the ending that I like would be he dies in battle.
Right. Perhaps this is a good time to discuss the endings then.
He went into sacrifice.
So the ending on the second sight Blu-ray is the ending where Kane kills himself with Cutshaw there, and Cutshaw leaves unaware that Kane has killed himself and notices blood on his shoe and runs back in, and Kane has stabbed himself or cut his wrists or something. No, he stabbed himself, he's got a lot of blood in his stomach. And then it ends with, I guess, Cutshaw finding out that there is life beyond this life when he
There's also the carrying down the stairs and sort of like a Pietà moment of how Mary is with Christ over in Rome, that statue.
That's a great shot.
So that's the ending that we both watched.
There is an ending on the VHS and the letterbox and the Laserdisc, and then the VHS have the ending where he does not stab himself.
Right.
So it looks like to me, and why I think that it works succinctly is that I believe when he was in battle with the bikers, that was his death sacrifice he was making there, and that he decided that I'm going to die for this guy. Because Cutshaw's in a dangerous situation. Kane has put himself in a dangerous situation of fighting off all these bikers and bringing him home, and that he was dying, which it would also make sense why the confessional part of the end of the film is also so sad and mournful. The idea of him stabbing himself because to me, the psychology around that is like, I'm stabbing myself because I didn't die in battle, because it wasn't a straw death, because I was trying to sacrifice for you and they didn't kill me. So I'm going to kill myself to show you that.
Interesting.
Okay.
And it's a little bit more complicated for me to get there than you were stabbed and hurt in battle. And and the whole sacrifice of bringing him home to die because of that.
But I love that after all of this really, really heavy stuff, it's it's a lot to kind of digest in the last 15 minutes or so of the film. It ends on a really uplifting note, certainly in the version that we saw.
Yeah.
Quite similar in a way to the ending of The Exorcist. I mean, I guess it's impossible not to draw some kind of parallel. But it ends in a very uplifting note where we do find out that, I mean, it's kind of ends with Cutshaw rejoicing, I suppose, that his friend, which is essentially what Kane became, has reached out to him kind of from beyond the veil and showed him that there is something beyond death. And I think the ending's quite lovely.
It is. And if we look at the Exorcist ending where Regan kisses the priest, it means that she, to me, remembers a little who is the hero in her story.
Yeah.
Even though she was possessed by the devil. And in here, there's a scene where, because it's about the medal and coveting the medal, and then at some point, Cutshaw says, it's like, if you die, it's a throwaway line, show me a sign.
Yeah.
And he's able to find, Cutshaw is able to find his medal again and sees it as Kane giving him a sign that there's something beyond, which is the hope of the supernatural, Christ, the afterlife, whatever it might be. Within this type of storytelling is the joy of it. Which is interesting because though the Catholic Church hated The Exorcist to me would be one of the best recruiting films for that point of view. Because it's like, who's the hero of the story? Well, it's going to be the Catholic priest who's going to like kick Satan's ass, right? It's the same thing like here. It's like, so sacrifice, belief. But I don't know if the ending, the Exorcist is definitely a Catholic ending. I wouldn't say Ninth Configuration was, because it's just talking about that there is something beyond this.
Yeah.
And also, if there's something beyond this, and let's say we're going to use the word heaven, it also means that Kane was forgiven and wasn't damned.
Wow, yeah.
I think about it now, which is why we do these podcasts.
Yeah, having on this kind of thing.
You heard it first here, folks.
Definitely. So, Heather, I think that this film, like, critics have been kinder to it over the years, I think. What are the reasons why you think that this, because obviously this didn't make money at the time. What are the reasons why you thought that was? I don't know.
It's probably the content of it, because it's like, it's not an action film. It was not how comedies were back in the day. It might have, and you guys can speak because you're over in the UK area. Does it feel a little bit more European in its humor?
I think it does.
I think it probably does.
I think it does. I very much think it does.
Because we would have to look at what was out, and it's also a hybrid movie. It's a movie that has exploitation, biker elements. It talks about Catholicism. It talks about atheism. It talks about the Vietnam. There's just so many things that are in there, and I think it's hard to talk about a film like Ghoulies 2, very easy to talk about.
Yep.
Configuration, we're still sitting here as people who, like, some people saw it since we were like young punk rockers. Other people are just seeing it now. And like, there's still so much to talk about what the film is about. And I'd also challenge, do mainstream audiences want movies that they want to sit and philosophically think about what something is about. I mean, all this inspires the work that I do. And I myself read philosophy, which is like a hated subject in university. People hate it. A lot of people are not a huge fan of philosophy, but I like reading narratives and very complex things and figuring out what they're trying to tell me. And film to me is the strongest part if you're going to do a Socratic, philosophical, rhetorical debate. Film is the best place for it because you're going to also be able to get the read off the actors and the read off the narrative to figure out sort of like these greater truths of what the film's trying to do. I also feel on my end, this sort of filmmaking is incredibly hard to do, which is very talking heavy, not very action heavy. So it comes down to like who you're casting and what the script is to even pull something like this off. And now you're pulling something off that kind of nobody wants or no one understands, which is why you have to love this film more, because no one asked for Ninth Configuration. People to make, more movies, adapt more of his books. They probably wanted Legion, even though Legion itself is so similar to what Ninth Configuration is doing. It's just more on the genre side.
I think it's a shame that a film where its disparate elements coexist so well that it almost suffered for that, in the sense that, from what I can tell, because I tried to read up a little bit about the reception at the time and things ahead of doing this, and it seemed like some of the problems that it had commercially were that it was difficult to know how to sell this to people. Because obviously, because you had Blatty, who, I mean, the book was originally headed up with like nobody writes humor like William Peter Blatty, and then it was, when that book was reissued, it had become a tale of shrieking terror, of which it's not. And but also you had Blatty, who I'd say, like, I mean, it seems like a lot of kind of his background and a lot of what he was made of was comedy writing, who had just made his name as a horror writer. Do you think it's possible that there's no right way to sell this to a mainstream audience?
The way that I talk about it when I want people to watch it with me, other than it means a lot to me. So it's like, one, I feel that it depicts a lot of my interests in a cinematic way, artistically. But I talked about it from the script and technique level of why filmmakers should watch it because of the type of writing. To general audiences, I mean, I used to be in like marketing for 13 years. So the idea of like, how would you? Because you could even go like it's a comedy in an asylum, but I don't think a lot of folks want to be challenged by the debate and the subjects that the film is about, and that might be its fatal flaw. Because it is funny, because it has all these great characters in it, but it's like what it's talking about is challenging, but not in a good way. It's not in a way that people want to be challenged. I don't know if it makes you feel smarter when you're done watching it. It's like, and also if, again, as a non-believer, I am fascinated in theological debate because I think what was his background? Because I was in Georgetown looking at the steps recently. It's sort of like this Jesuit academic debate. I find that is so specific of a need to have people watch it. So for filmmakers, definitely how the script is put together and how you do this sort of like fencing dialogue. There's other examples of this, but I think on both sides, which it harkens back to like Camus and Sartre, to be like their plays and stuff like that. Both sides are equally meshed because it's a rhetorical debate. A lot of times you have great characters that are running through the film with monologues, and you don't have the other folks being present there to have the other side of that conversation. And I sometimes feel that a lot of movies, they have a strong through line philosophically, but the other side of the debate is not made as charismatic as the side that you're on. And this would be a film that I've shown it as an example, or I've had folks watch it to understand that, or folks that love character actors, but I don't think I could sell it to a lot of folks. What movie that debates religion in such a sense has ever been very pop? Like, how do you talk about these things in a broader sense that isn't so isolating? Yeah. Because the techniques that they use in the film and the dialogue and the acting is all very isolating unless you're open to it. Yeah. In a sense. No, because it's so specific. But that's all the reason why I love it. And because it has such a unique vision. I mean, how do you sell people to watch like Holy Mountain? I mean, it's necessary for everyone on Earth to watch Holy Mountain, but it's hard to get them to sit down because what it's about and what it looks like is incredibly challenging.
And I think that there's something in that. I think that there's so much going on here, and there's so many different elements that are so disparate competing that I think that it probably would have been difficult to pitch to a mainstream audience and get them to engage with it in a way that would have been necessary.
It's a fucking nightmare. Yeah. From a marketing standpoint.
I'm really glad you brought this to the table, Heather. As a first-time viewer, I absolutely love this. A lot of the stuff that we do for the podcast is
goofy,
but it's also often like a first watch for me as well. So I'm flying blind to things that a lot of the time people have kind of got these kind of very deep-seated attachments to, and it can sometimes be a little bit difficult for me seeing it for the first time, age 31, to pick that apart. I didn't really have any problem doing that tonight because I love this front to back.
There you go.
Well, part of these podcasts are to be evangelical for the crazy shit we love.
This is why we're here.
That's why we're here. That's
what we're doing.
We need
to convert other people into watching this crazy shit that we love.
Yeah. 6 years on from your last one, what did you make of it, Andy?
I mean, 6 years ago, I loved it. It's one of those films that, although when I was younger and dafter and had stupid long hair, I tried. I couldn't wrap my head around, but I kept going back to it. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't like I ever thought, oh no, that's weird. I'm not investing in that. I kept returning to it because there was something in it that engaged me to a point where I had to kind of one day see how it shook out. And I think I was probably about 18 the first time I watched it properly. And when I stuck with it, I realised what I'd been missing. And I don't think it's something that at 15 I wouldn't necessarily have picked up on. But I've revisited it a bunch of times since. And yeah, I love it. I think it's a great film. It's mad in the best way, but I think that's part of what makes it so great.
And what's important about this podcast is that you could be desperately in love with Ninth Configuration and you'll have no one to discuss Ninth Configuration with.
I think that this is why we're a firm believer in letting guests choose the films.
Yeah, part of what this particular podcast was about was bringing these films that maybe weren't received so well critically or maybe are a bit underseen.
Yes, underseen. Yeah.
Arguing why they should, why they deserve a second appraisal or just a new glimpse or a new audience. And I think that audience, though they may have to be cajoled into it, I think the audience for the Ninth Configuration exists there now.
Yeah, because it's not even at the phase where it can be underrated because it's so underseen.
Yeah, I absolutely think great success across the board, across the three of us. I feel like Mitch, this is actually you're a bit taken aback by how much you like this.
It's just a great selection. It's been comfortably my favourite of the first watches that we've had so far. Heather, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk the Ninth Configuration with us tonight. Just before we pull this to an end, I do want to take a minute to talk about the Ranger.
All right.
Yeah, just so obviously it's opening Frightfest this year. We're all stoked to see it. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about it?
It's I produced it on the Glass-Eyed Side with Jenn Wexler. First-time director. She's made incredible films like Most Beautiful Island and Darling and all that stuff like that. And it's a punk rock slasher film. It's done in sort of like heightened candy color, Lisa Frank kind of vibe. And it's the story of a final girl as she sort of it follows her and her friends for a bit, and then she faces off with the big bad, and it's a full punk rock soundtrack. Dayglow Abortion, Fang, The Avengers. It's meditative, it's quiet, it's wild. There's a lot of different tones and feelings in it. If I had to tell you guys like what it kind of feels like an R-rated Goosebumps, because it's highly stylized, it's fun to watch, it's a fucking blast, and there is some gore in it.
Yeah,
I cannot wait to see this.
Every punk rocker who has seen it says that these people remind me. That's one reason I wanted to do the screenplay, because I read the screenplay and I went, these assholes remind me of my friends. and I love the Ranger character, and it's like, that's it. It has to be made. I sort of like knew how to help bring the punk rock elements to Jenn due to my lifestyle decision I made when I was 13 years old.
Sure. So this premiered at South by Southwest, right?
Yeah, premiered at South by Southwest as a midnight movie, and it has done a very large film fest run because we all felt that sort of a slasher film, a horror film, is for the proletariat. It's for everybody, and it's also because it's a punk rock film. It's for every punk rocker out there, and it has to do the tour. From my perspective, because my social media is so active, and since I go to film fest all over the place, I also want to make sure that this film has an international audience because what was it? I was at Night Visions Film Fest and I met like Finnish horror fans and I was told it's kind of like a neglected marketplace for genre because they sort of get lumped in with Europe and lumped in with Scandinavia. And I just thought like after that experience, it's like this horror film has to find all horror films.
Yes.
There cannot be a horror fan that we did not turn over that rock to find them or punk rockers everywhere. So to me, it's important to do as much as you can when you have a movie like that to get it to everybody who wants to see it all over the world of all cultures. Because I think who loves horror? And just the same thing, the question of like who likes video games? Every single fucking person on earth. The ability to see it, they could love it, they could follow the Twitter. There's a crazy punk girl that runs the Twitter. They can find it on Facebook. They can find me at like on Heather Buckley on Facebook. I friend like any person who's part of the horror community, so we can all talk about horror movies night and day as the sun moves around the earth because of the hours I keep. So
no, but thanks so much for taking the time to come on, and thanks for choosing the film as well.
All right, man. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take it easy. So, not really too much convincing needing done this week. Not to the two of us, at least.
No, it was actually really nice to revisit the Ninth Configuration again. Yeah, it's not something I go back to at any great regularity, but when it came up as the film, I was quite interested and excited when Heather suggested it, so I really liked going back and watching it again.
So, like, speaking as a first-time viewer, I could see it entering my rotation.
Oh, really? It's going
sure.
to enter the 5-disc multi-changer?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. What's in your changer? Remember when they used to ask that at the end of interviews? I think it might. I mean, I was pretty vocal in there, but I thought I loved it. Yeah, it really worked for me in a lot of ways. Something that we didn't touch on in the main episode, like I said, I did a little bit of kind of reading, just trying to understand the background of it, the reception of it, and so on. Mm-hmm. From what I can glean from IMDb, it seems as though there's a remake in the works.
What?
Yeah, a remake of
this film of
the Ninth
Configuration.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's not.
Yeah, I know. So
what?
There's no. From what I could see, there was no names attached to it, but it's being directed by Rodrigo H. Villa.
Ah, my favourite. Yeah.
Well, he's done a lot of documentary stuff.
Go on then. Uh-huh.
The only other feature that is on the go is The Last Man, which is an upcoming sci-fi, I believe, film starring Hayden Christensen and Harvey Keitel. So, I am
the paper boy from In the Mouth of Madness.
Yes.
Oh my god! My word. Yeah.
So I am approaching that one, admittedly, and like I say, I'm not precious about remakes. I am approaching that one with the requisite level of apprehensiveness.
Yeah, I didn't know about that at all.
Nor did I.
That's unnerving. I wonder if Heather knows about that.
We can hit her up after the episode and ask the question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wow, that's mind-boggling.
Yeah, stirring stuff. But
it seems almost unremakeable to me.
I think that it feels very much of a time. I think that trying to mess with that is a dangerous game.
Be interesting to see. I'm of the opinion that all the kind of farcical elements and the comedy stuff that's going to get gone. That's going to be gone.
Yeah, and I think that's so much of the charm of the thing.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to go. It'll go too heavy. It'll go too dark, and it'll be Shutter Island.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about, basically. Yeah, I think so.
But maybe shite.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, you know what? I was going to be like, I don't know.
What's his name? Villa?
Yes, Rodrigo Villa.
Rodrigo, if you're listening to this, if you come across this through some hashtag search, get in touch, drop us a message, have a chat with us about it.
Absolutely, we definitely want to know more.
Tell us that it won't be shite, because that's our worry.
Yeah, we have some questions, as people often do, about remakes, about things that they've got a lot of time for. So yeah, let's turn our attention though to the feedback this week.
There was quite a bit.
There really was.
We've whittled this down. I say I've done very, very little whittling.
I must admit, so it was me that I compiled the feedback this week. Apologies in advance if we missed something out. There was a lot of stuff here. Yep. So I did my best to try and include as much of a spread of the comments as we could.
It's worth mentioning that we are coming round more to the idea of moving the feedback section into the mini-sode.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to find the right time to do that. So we will make more time to include people's comments in the future. Yeah,
I think that we're basically kind of realising that if we have a conversation of the length of the one that we had tonight, say, that the episodes start might start feeling a little bit kind of bloated if we have a decent sized feedback at the end. Whereas I think that the minisodes are at the moment feeling a little bit short. So I think I think that it might make sense to do that. But again, of course, get in touch if that's something that offends you horribly. I
don't like change.
I can't imagine anyone feeling that impassioned about it, but you never know. So yeah, let's take a look at some things. So I want to cycle back to episode 0. Actually, or minisode 0.
Fucking hell.
Because Stevie Reeve, film fan Stevie on Twitter.
No one likes films more than Stevie Reeve.
Yeah, he's some guy. I've never seen anyone consume films like Stevie
He is a
Reeve.
proper cinephile.
So it's with no small amount of honour that announced that he's turned his attention to our podcast. He just said, I might be late to the party. Just listen to episode 0 of Strong Violent PC. If you don't follow them, please do. Also, follow Andy Makes Stuff and Watch Fair as Mitch, the host of the podcast.
Yeah, and that's a good message to kind of put out to everyone there. You can also follow us.
Yeah, you can follow our personal ones if you like.
That's the kind of thing you're into.
Yeah. So have you got anything? Let's try and move chronologically forward if we can.
Let me just try to get my shit in order here. I guess up next then, Leviathan.
Oh, feels like forever ago.
Yeah, 5 episodes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, half a show ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had One Take Doonan at Johnny Organ getting in touch to say, just watched Leviathan last night with the missus. Thanks for the recommendation, lads. Really enjoyed it. Had never even heard of it before SVPC. That's obviously the strong violent podcast.
That's a good abbreviation.
Yeah, because the one we had in mind is a little too close to the word slaves.
Yeah, I think we should bin that and just use that. SVPC.
Yeah, thanks for that, Johnny. We will take that on board.
Yeah, greatly appreciated for sure. So I don't have too much more kind of prior to Extra, but I have got a shitload about Extra.
I have an absolute fuck ton about Extra as well.
So,
I think everything from this point on is about Extra.
Yeah, same. So this episode, I mean, we got a lot of responses to it, positive and negative, and thanks a lot to everyone for taking the time. But I wouldn't necessarily say I was surprised, but it was nice to see such a kind of an outpouring of responses. I would say ranging from kind of mediocre to positive.
For the record, I introduced a friend of mine to it on Friday night, and they fucking hated it.
Really?
Yep, I'm not going to name names.
Okay.
But they know who they are, and they did not enjoy it. In fact, they fell asleep for a good half an hour.
Oh well, I mean, if you wait, if you miss any half hour of Extra when you wake up, it's not going to make any fucking sense.
It's not even it's like not even watching the same film.
Exactly. So Dennis Extra Atherton was, as you can imagine, pretty enthused about the fact that we'd gone in for Extra this week with Rob.
A torrent of tweets from Dennis Extra Atherton.
Yeah. But thanks very much for getting in touch, and also just for kind of sharing your experiences, and also just for your kind words about the episodes.
Yep.
I did say hearing you guys talk about my favorite film with Love has made my week. Rob was the perfect guest.
Oh.
Which is nice. Yeah, and also he offered a 5-word review, an extraordinary excursion into exaggeration. All with X's, of course.
See what he's done there. That's very clever.
Yeah. And staying with 5-word reviews, I want to just pivot to Laura on Twitter, getting in touch, saying 5-word review for Extra. Harry Bromley Davenport was high.
I would say that's pretty accurate.
Not a million miles off the mark, I would say.
No. Even when you see interviews of Harry now, it might be the case that he's high.
So Laura did actually get in touch with a little bit of a longer comment. So that's, I don't know how to say this, but on Twitter it's at BaynonLV.
Right, okay.
BEYNONLV. I said, liking this, always had a soft spot for Extra. The second sight blue is amazing. Harry BD is a star, but I knew that.
Okay, cool.
Staying with Extra,
of course.
We had a couple of comments from Haley Alice Roberts. That's at Welsh Demoness on Twitter. First off, we had, I bloody love Extra. It's a warped nightmare of ultra weird proportions meshed with British kitchen sink style drama. Incredibly visceral, gross out special effects. I really like the score.
Okay, there you go. Whoa, controversial.
For the most part, it's pretty inexplicable, but that adds to the overall charm.
Cool.
Which I think is fair enough. I think that ties in with a lot of where we landed on it. But also, she did turn her attentions to the director's cut.
Yeah.
And the new version. And she did
Which
say...
Rob also touched on and advised us to avoid.
Yeah, and but she said, so I felt that the new restoration impacted the overall charm. I prefer the graininess of the original. It adds to the film's mystique. The practical effects are astonishing and one of my favourite elements of it all. So that's kind of interesting, I think. So thanks very much to everyone that got in touch on that one. Do you have any more? Or is that,
I've got a few things here.
Oh, fire away.
Quite a lot here. Chelsea Sato got in touch saying, you and Rob, my two favourite people in the world. I gotta get on this. Now, I don't know if that's in relation to myself or you.
It's you, I would say. And as a result, I feel very attacked.
feel attacked, feel left out. Well, I mean, you're one of my favourite people in the world.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for getting in touch, Chelsea. That's at Avenge Locks. We had Dave Cooper at Deluxe_man.
Oh, yeah? Excellent.
Getting in touch again on Extra saying, thanks for convincing me to want to watch this. I can see you guys help drain my wallet.
I've had a couple of these.
And again, lovely that people are actually hunting these things down and
so cool.
Sinking their own money into actually buying them.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yep. Now, the last thing I've got is from Gravely Unusual magazine.
Oh, cool. Okay.
At Gravely Unusual.
Hello.
Saying, love this film, the score specifically, as well as the birthing scene. Nasty with 4 Ys.
It is nasty, I would say.
Nasty.
No, I'd agree with that. And I have one more, but it's turning away from Extra and actually turning our attentions towards this week's selection. So we had Barry Delgarno, our old pal, getting in touch on Facebook saying, oh, this should be interesting. Well, I hope it was. And also saying, while we're on the subject of William Peter Blatty, hopefully someone will at some point do The Exorcist 3, which I
don't think there's anyone more qualified than Heather to come back on and discuss The Exorcist 3.
That's very true, yeah. Actually, I want to bring something up really quickly, just because right at the very last minute, absolute 11th hour entry from Ricky Munga.
Right.
Best known for previously introducing us to the film Big Tit
Zombie,
which I've still yet to see.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I haven't hunted it down yet. I'm just going to write it on my hand.
Yeah, but he did just get in touch, again, ref the selection of the 9th configuration, saying, I love this film. This film is in-depth viewing and should be seen by all with multiple L's.
Cool. Going down the same road as that.
Yeah, like a liberal approach to consonant distribution.
Yeah, spread them out.
Yeah, definitely. So that's your love for this week. But thank you very much to everyone for getting in touch again.
Yeah, madness.
Yeah, that's
absolute
hefty.
Madness.
Yeah. So, like I say, I think that we are kind of drifting towards the idea of migrating the feedback into the minisodes.
Yeah, I think we're gonna.
Yeah, I think that's where
it's going to take us a wee while to balance it out and actually do it. Give us a couple of episodes, but we will certainly do it.
Yeah, I think
give you more bang for your buck in a minisode and a bit of a quicker reprieve from the full episodes.
Yeah, definitely. But like I say, I mean, so if you get in touch and it feels like we're not reading something out in the right week or something, we will get to it. It's just a case of we're going to have to do a kind of migration of that. And that might take a week or two. So
by no means stop sending us stuff.
Please keep sending us stuff.
Yeah.
On a related note, the various ways you can do that. You can get in touch on Facebook and Instagram at Strong Language Violent Scenes. You can tweet us as well at Strong Violent PC. And you can email stronglanguageviolentscenes@gmail.com.
Hashtag SVPC.
Hashtag SVPC.
And if you're wondering where you can get us,
you know what I was.
I bet you were. You can get us on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, Google Podcasts app, and the mighty Spotify. Yeah, you can get us in all of those places. Basically anywhere you get your pods.
Yeah, gassing our net far and wide these days.
That's it.
So a big thank you to Heather Buckley, the producer of Jenn Wexler's The Ranger.
Massive thanks, Heather. Looking forward to catching up in August at Frightfest.
Yeah, and just a great conversation as well.
Superb.
A lot of time. I had a lot of fun talking about the 9th configuration tonight. And thank you, of course, to yourselves for listening as well.
And thank you, Mitch.
Well, thanks, man. Thank you too, while we're liberally throwing around thanks. And of course, as always, thank you to our Lord and Saviour, David Strathairn. So, we'll be back on Monday morning.
Strathairn we trust.
And Strathairn I trust, man, honestly.
What would David Strathairn do?
Yeah, My first time that I realised that I loved David Strathairn was his appearance in The Uninvited.
Right, okay.
Which I am under no impression that The Uninvited is a particularly good film. You know, the remake of A Tale of Two Sisters with Elizabeth Banks and Emily Browning.
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, I was like, that guy's kind of subtle. This young upstart man has a bright and illustrious career ahead of him. And then I realised that obviously he'd been in film for about 30 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, in conclusion, fucking love David Strathairn. Moving swiftly on, we are back Monday morning at 8 a.m. GMT, where we announce the guest and film for next week.
Yes, indeed.
And what a cracker it shall be.
Oh, yeah, I already know.
Yeah, it's all decided. We're well ahead of the game this time.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, and don't forget that it is better to die a hero than live as food in a world of chuds. Good night.
Good night.
You've been listening to Strong Language and Violent Scenes with Andy Stewart and Mitch Bain. Strong Language and Violent Scenes theme by Mitch Bain, production and artwork by Andy Stewart. Find us on Stitcher, iTunes and Podbean.